We'll get started in couple. I think we're waiting for a few to join. Yeah, cool. Okay, guys. So we'll get going. I started my screen sharing. I hope it is visible to everyone, right? Cool. We'll get going. Okay. So good evening, guys. So I welcome you to this quick session on data analysis for recruiters. A quick background about me. Guys, I'll put every one of you on mute. You can unmute only if there's any questions. You can unmute, or else it'll be right. Put you all on mute. If there's any questions, you can unmute. Okay, cool. So a quick background about me for folks who are attending my session for the first time. So myself, Ashfaq Ahmed, I've been in the recruitment industry for last 8 years, and I've been training recruiters for last 6+ years. And the areas of interest or areas of specialization where I train recruiters are in is around sourcing, technology, and HR tech. And these days, I'm involved in building some technology products for recruiters. So this is a quick background about the kind of work which I do, right? Okay, cool. So we'll get going into the topic directly. So what is this data analysis for recruiters basically? So why should recruiters know something like around analyzing data sets? When we started doing recruitment, when we started doing sourcing, right, basically, we've been doing sourcing which is mostly in line to job descriptions, mostly in line to in line to job descriptions and or to obtain candidates, right? That's all. But if you look at the kind of work which we've been doing, right? If you look at this slide, we've been dealing with data sets. Like for example, LinkedIn alone has some 16 million users. Right? If you look at the Indian context, LinkedIn has some close to 70 million data sets. So what are we dealing with? We are dealing with nothing but data sets. So if we are not aware of how to deal with data sets, right? How to talk to data sets, right? Or how to clean data sets basically, right? Then we are not doing a great job basically, because as recruiters we deal with data sets. So what is missing in our entire recruiting gamut is the data lens. We are majorly GD centric when in our sourcing approach, but we need to be fairly data centric because we deal with huge amount of data. LinkedIn alone 70 million. Naukri has some good amount of database. So when you're dealing with data sets, then obviously you should know how to be more data centric. In that case, what we need to be doing is we need to be adopting concepts from industries, from parallel industries which deal with data sets. Like for example, big data, for example, statistical modeling, right? So these are the industries where they deal with huge amount of data sets. They deal with large amount of data sets. So as recruiters or basically as sourcers, when we are dealing with so much data, we should be adopting some concepts from parallel industries which deal with large amount of data sets and implement that in a recruiting context. That's when we will be able to justify or we will be able to do a better job in terms of dealing with data sets. Okay. Today, the biggest challenge for recruiters is we don't have a data centric approach. We are just, our sourcing approach is majorly just a bunch of keywords, right? It is just a bunch of keywords, nothing more, nothing less, right? So we need to get into a more data centric zone. That is what we'll be seeing today, which will be more like an overview types in terms of what is possibly you could do in terms of dealing with data sets, right? So I'll just be introducing you to what kind of possibilities are there when you're approaching data sets and how you can slice data sets basically. So why recruiters aren't data centric? This is one of the major reasons why recruiters are not data centric, because we treat job descriptions as holy scriptures, right? So if something is in the job description, we're like, oh, it is mentioned in the job description. So what happens basically, our approach is very, very JD centric. If there are 5 mandatory skills in the JD, then what we do is we're just thinking inline to the JD. Okay, 5 mandatory, those are 5 mandatory skills I need. But what we miss out is to understand, let's say if I need 5 mandatory skills, how these possess these 5 skills, right? If there are candidates who are going to possess these 5 skills, how they present their data, what is the manner they are presenting the data? Do I understand a holistic view of how candidates, wherever I'm searching on, whether it's a job board, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's whatever source you're searching on, right? Do you have an understanding in terms of how your candidates are presenting data? Unfortunately, most of us do not have. So that's why what happens, we limit our searches to that 5 keywords which are in the JD, which is mandatory as mentioned by the hiring manager, and our sourcing effort revolves just around that, because we do not really have a hold of how candidates present their data, what they write, what they don't write, how they write, right? This information is not there, and we don't really consider this in terms of going and hunting candidates, right? So let's see what kind of an approach we need to carry. So we'll take one case study basically, right? And then we'll drill down that case study, right? And there might be some questions just to keep it interactive, and we will use a chat window so that too many people using might overlap, right? So we will use the chat window to get views from you, right? Different perspectives from you, right? Okay, so here's a case study. So we'll take this case study and then we'll drill it down slowly, right? So that it becomes easy to understand what is being conveyed in terms of analyzing data sets. Okay, so the case study is like this. Let's say you have to hire a Java developer from like product firms, right? Basically, you have to hire Java developer from product firms. You are probably hiring for a product firm, high-end product firm, right? So you're hiring. So in that case, what could be the potential approach recruiters would take, right? If I have to hire Java developers and you are on LinkedIn, you're going to use LinkedIn as a platform. So what could be a potential approach recruiters could take? So these are the possible approaches target or competitor firms, right? You might have the target firms or competitor firms, top colleges, or maybe you drill it down by domain, internet, computer, software. Is there anything else with which you would go? Can you put it on the chat window? Is there anything else other than this approach you would take if you need backend Java developers? If you need backend Java developers for product client, right, for a product firm, is there any other approach which you would adopt to other than these approaches? Put it on the chat window if you feel if there's any other approach which you would adopt to other than these three, and considering that you are on top of LinkedIn. Guys, any other approaches? So I'm going to make it interactive so that it's not like one-sided. Any other approaches do you think you will be taking to ensure these are the three approaches which I have mentioned, right? Is there any other approach you would take to ensure you get product guys? If there's no, you can also comment like you don't have any other approach. So these are the three approaches which I thought like recruiters will go with, and I've penned it down. Is there any other approach which you would take on top of LinkedIn? Guys, put it on the chat window. Yes, no, any other approach? Okay, Boolean string is fine. Reference, I'm talking about LinkedIn, right? I'm very specific. I'm being very specific. We're talking about LinkedIn as a platform, right? So yes, we will obviously apply Boolean, right? That is the primary thing. But then overall, when you have a data, how will you break it down, right? So Boolean, obviously, whatever it's like Java database, whatever you will include that. That's a given thing. So we are not talking about that. We're talking about how will you approach. So basically, when you apply Boolean, let's say you are applying a Java database kind of a Boolean or web service, whatever. So now when you're doing that, you have huge amount of data. You have lakhs of data when you do that, right? On top of LinkedIn when you're doing it, at least for an India location, you have lakhs of data. Then what will you do? You will break it down. Maybe you'll go with target firms, competitor firms. You'll go with top colleges, right? So this is the kind of an approach you'll take so that you hit on the right data set basically, right? So according to me, I don't think there's any other approach recruiters would generally take outside these 2-3 approaches, right? But there's a challenge in this approach, okay? So what is the challenge in this approach is, to start with, these approaches looks fine, okay? I can hunt from competitors, I can go for top colleges, yes, to start with, it's fine. But there are some challenges. Point one, when you take these approaches, you are actually biased in terms of your hiring because you're very specific with competitors, right? You're very biased in terms of colleges, right? Your hiring becomes way biased. You're not thinking outside it, right? So when you start looking at this kind of an approach, right? Two, you've already set your mind, okay, this is what I would be looking at. This is the kind of an audience which I'll be hitting at, right? Three, if you hit this audience, then what next? Right, you've got people from target firms, you've got people from top colleges, right? Then what next, right? You've got people from internet domain, right? On LinkedIn, you have this domain filter, right? Wherein you can filter it down with internet, and then you get majorly product folks, right? You've done this. Then what next? So that's when what happens, you don't get a 360-degree view. Your view is very, very narrowed in terms of data sets. You are not approaching a 360-degree view. So what do I mean by a 360-degree view? I'll just give you an example. So what I was doing, I was just analyzing the data set of Flipkart, right, based out of India, which is a fairly good product firm, which is acquired by Walmart now, right? So I was just doing some data analysis to look how the developers, the techies, the backend developers in Flipkart look like, right? So how does the data look like? So the data looks like this. 40% come from a top colleges background, right? So you have your IITs, your NITs, all that, right? Bits. So they come from a 40% is this data set, right? They come from top colleges. Now you have 25% who probably come from your target companies. You might have some 50, 60 target companies, and they come from your target companies. But the point here is that 25% of data also includes that 15% from top colleges, right? Like let's say if you use top colleges in your search, then those Guys, can you mute yourself unless it is a question? Okay. Guys, someone is on mute. Ashfaq, can you put people on mute? Cool. Yeah. So now we're discussing about how the data is organized for Flipkart. I just picked up as an example, right? So 40% top colleges is how their data looks like. And then 25% could be from target companies. You can have some 50, 60 target companies, but that 25% includes 15% of top colleges if you have used it, right? So that means there's only like 15% of a data left, 10, 15% of a new data which is left, right? Now what happens if you put together 50-55% of a data you get it from this audience, which is top colleges, target firms, right? That's what we're talking about, right? Target companies, top colleges, and then top colleges, right? These are the two primary, and then we use internet and all, right? So these combinations you use, you get an audience of somewhere between 40-50%, right? Or 50-60% max. Now there is a good amount of audience which is outside this bucket, which is outside the bucket of top colleges. They're outside the bucket of target firms, right? They're outside. So which is your good amount of 40-50%. It varies. Okay, it depends on job description to job description. This data set varies, and also varies a bit. Depends on the company as well. It varies, but it is in and around there, plus or minus 10, right? I would say plus or minus 10 is what the variation would be basically, right? So now what happens? This 40%, 45% of a data is actually a huge data, right? So that is where brute force is applied in sourcing. What is brute force basically? Today, if you ask me why there are so many recruiters, why a company outsources their hiring to so many agencies basically, because of this particular pie, which is generally around 40-60%, right? This is an unstructured pie because you do not know how to target this pie, 40-60%, because you have structured the top colleges, your target firms, you have structured it, you've got that 40-50% there. But this remaining 40-60%, which varies from company to company, hiring to hiring, requirement to requirement, right? Which is between 40-60%, the others which you're seeing, which is an unstructured data, which is an unstructured data. So that's when what happens, the brute force is applied, 20 recruiters, 30 recruiters, right? You outsource it to agencies because you let people like them to work the way they want and somehow get those people of like 40-50%, that crowd, because that is unorganized. You do not know how to go about getting it. So that is where it gets challenging. That is where today the biggest effort of a recruiter goes there. If you can structure that information, this remaining 40-60%, if you know how to traverse through that data set, trust me, you can bring down the sourcing time. You can bring down the number of recruiters required to fulfill. So how do we do this? It's very simple. We need to get a holistic view of the data set, how the entire data set is presented, and how can I bucket the data sets, right? How can I split data sets? So people who have attended the sourcing series, who have attended the mini diploma series from Recruiting Monk, they would say, okay, we'll use not operator. Yes, not is one of the ways how you would do it, but you need to know how do you use it. Not is just like your axe, right? It's just an armory, but you should know how do you use that axe and cut the wood and make a good table out of it, right? So not is the way ahead. Not is the Superman of sourcing, the least used operator. Yes, all agreed. But if you do not know how to use that axe, right, and then cut the wood in the right shape and make a table out of it, then it becomes difficult, right? So that's how it is. So now let's look at how do we go about bucketing data sets in a very organized manner. So after this session, you'll get an overview of how you can minimize effort by structuring the unstructured data. So I always say this. sourcing is an unstructured activity. Sourcing is an unstructured activity, but you can bring structure to this unstructured activity to some extent. So that's what we are going to see, to what extent we can bring structure to this unstructured activity, right? When you can bring structure to this, that's where your time gets minimized, right? And that's where you can automate it. How you can automate? By creating search libraries. You can create search libraries and then go about just copy pasting and using it rather than putting an effort of redoing it again and again, right? So now let's look at it. We need a data-driven approach. So what kind of an approach you need is, let's say you're working for a backend developer, you need a very holistic view, right? Like how many backend developers are there overall in India, or maybe overall in Bangalore, or whatever location you're hiring for, right? And then you need to know, how do I segregate these data sets, right? And how do I go about approaching my sourcing by organizing data sets into buckets? Let's say your data can be organized into 10 buckets. For example, first bucket will have your 80%, 90% accuracy. Second bucket, 75, 70, goes on. Then what happens if you can bucket your data sets like this? Then your sourcing effort goes down, and you know which bucket you are approaching. And this also saves the effort if you're working as a team, right? If you're working as a team, like five recruiters, 3 recruiters are working as a team, you can classify these buckets and give each individual one bucket, right? So that's where you need a very holistic view. So when you get a job description, don't start looking at, okay, this is what the need is, right? That is where we go wrong. We say, okay, this is what the need is. No, don't go there. You get the job description, treat that as a reference point. And then what you do, start thinking how candidates would present, right? If the candidates are out there, how they would write, what they would present, and then bring that reference point into play. So what is today is missing is we hardly think about how candidates present the data, how they structure the information, right? That is what is required. That is what we are going to look at in terms of analyzing how the data set is presented. So holistically, there are 1 million developers in India. Approximately, the number comes somewhere between 8.5 or 9.5 million. Like 0.85 or 0.95 million, right? So that's where it comes, 0.85 or 0.95. So I've rounded off to 1 million developers. Okay. So 1 million developers approximately in India who uses Java on their profile and who have a designation like engineer, software developer, SDE, technical. So these kind of designations is present. So now you get a holistic view. Okay, there are 1 million developers like this in India. And then once you get this holistic view, then what you do is you classify your data sets. So that is what we are going to look at. How do we break down our data sets? So to do this, we need to understand the data persona. What is it? What is data persona? It is nothing but, I would say, more of a candidate persona of how candidates are presenting their information, right? How candidates are mentioning their information on platform like LinkedIn, right? So each platform, it can slightly vary based on the information architecture of the platform, based on how people are writing that platform, based on how people are using that platform. There are different patterns. So we have picked LinkedIn as a common example, and we are doing an analysis on top of LinkedIn. So if you look at the data on LinkedIn for backend developers, this is how it is split. IT services domain alone has 50% of data sets, right? It varies between 50 to 60%, but that is the one which has a major chunk of data set, right? 50 to 60%. And then computer software, somewhere between 25 to 35% is what it occupies. Internet is the most least data pie. I would say it's somewhere around 3-4%. And then is remaining is other domains, right? So this is how our overview of data looks like on top of LinkedIn. So let's analyze that data further. So we're going to get an overview of this data. So if you look at this overview, what you see is there are 3 gamuts of information here. Suitable data, gray data, not suitable data, right? Suitable data, gray data, and not suitable data. Why do you need to classify this? So that you know where you need what kind of an effort, basically, right? When you're addressing a data set which has more not suitable, right? Then you know, okay, this will take more time. Let's say, for example, internet has very less not suitable or your gray data. It has more suitable data because that domain is like that. Once you select the domain, you know ki majorly somewhere around 80 to 90%, I'm going to get product guys. You are aware of it, basically, right? But then once you go to software, the ambiguity increases. And then once you choose services, the ambiguity even more increases. Because in services, there are product guys, like let's say people from Flipkart, Walmart, even Google, Microsoft, choosing this IT services as a domain in their LinkedIn profile, right? There are people, there are good people, but that domain has good amount of junk data as well, and also grey data, right? So that's why what I've done is I have just marked it, right? Software services, others. This has good amount of not suitable and also has good amount of gray data. So this requires data cleaning, right? Because it has suitable data for you, right? Some bit of suitable data is there. In that case, how would you go about addressing this, right? So what we are doing, we are breaking down the data sets, right? So we see that there's, let's say there's 1 million data sets. So how are you breaking down that data set basically, right? That 1 million, I took it for India. You can break it down even to, let's say, city wise, you can break it down to Bangalore data sets, but this overview remains more or less the same, right? So your 50% will be IT services, 30% will be software, right? And 3-4% will be internet, and then remaining others, right? And within that, we are seeing this overview, how the data is classified. Now we see this software services, others requires good amount of data cleaning because it has a lot of overlapping and not suitable data sets. So how do we go about doing data cleaning? So now we're going to talk about slicing data. So what I'm doing now, I'm picking up the larger pie, which is your services, right? Services has the 50% of information. I'm picking up that particular data for now, and I'm going to slice that data set. So what we're going to do is here, we're going to use one of the concepts in big data, right? There's a concept in a big data called as slicing and dicing of data sets, right? I have spoken about this in my sourcing and my coaching series. I've spoken about this. So what it means is whenever you have large information, break that information down, right, into smaller pieces and then address that information. Then your job becomes more easier. Today, as recruiters, we think that if we have more search results, then it's amazing. No, it's not, right? More is bad, less is good. Today we are in the era of minimalism. Okay, so when you have large data set, it's not good because it is unorganized. You are not focused and you do not know what to do next, right? Because you have so much information. So you need to break that information down. Let's say, for example, information IT services domain that has 50% of data, which I just showed you. So now how do I break that information down, right? Let's say I've given a search, whatever Boolean search it is, right? You've given whatever Boolean search, you have got 1 lakh data set, right? You've got 1 lakh data set. In that case, IT services alone will have 50,000. Can you consume all that 50,000 in one shot? You cannot consume, because that 50,000 will have good amount of irrelevant data, gray data, and then some bit of suitable data when you're hiring for a product client, right? Product company. How do I break it? So you can break it down in these manners. Target companies, you can bring it down, or you can include negating services. You can break by top colleges list and all that. So now out of all this, what model I have picked out? I have picked out the model of negating services, which I'll tell you why. So this is how I'm slicing the data set. So what am I doing here? Backend developers, right? The first model which I'm going to use is internet. Why? Because that has the most suitable data for me. So I'll start my search with the most suitable data set, which is internet, right? Because I want to look at the most suitable data, and but that is very, very minimal data, right? It's less than 5% data. So I will fade that information out, right? I'll finish that off. Now I need more data. Then what next? Next is my IT services domain, which has a large data, which is 50% of data, right? Now this 50% of data, how am I going to break it down in a very, very structured model? Model number 1, which is 30% of data, is what? By negating top services companies. By negating top services, if you pick up the top 4-5 services, your Infosys, Cognizant, Accenture, HCL, Tata Consultancy, right? If you pick like some 5-6 top services companies, then what happens? These services companies alone has good amount of data, right? So what you could do is you can negate that services in model 1, right? You've picked up IT services as a domain on LinkedIn, and then what you do is you pick some top 5 services and negate that, not Accenture or Infosys or Tata or Cognizant. Once you do that, then what's happening? You have minimized the junk by 20%. You've minimized the junk by 20%. So you're looking at a 30% data which is not from services background, right? You have that data. Now you're further breaking it down by adding target firms. Let's say you have some 5 target firms: Walmart, Amazon, right, InMobi, and a bunch of others, right? You add it. That means what? You want to look at people who are actually mention IT services in their domain, right? And they don't have the top 5 services because you've negated them. And then they've mentioned the targeted firms, whatever competitor firms or target firms you want, they have mentioned it. That is your next pie of data, right? Once you're done with it, what you could do next, you can move to top colleges, right? So in this case, what will you do? You will minus the target firms, whatever you have used in 2A, right? This says 2A, right? So whatever you have used in 2A, like let's say, for example, you have used 10 target firms, minus them and include the top colleges, IIT, NIT, or BITS, whatever, right? Put that and not negate the Walmart, Amazon, whatever you use as target firms in the 2A. So then what happens? You get a new set of audience, which is what from top colleges, and they are not from the target firms because you've already seen the target firms in 2A, right? And then what? The final data is what in this model? Minus, which is not operator, the top colleges and the firms, because you've seen them in 2A and 2B, right? You negate them, and then you get the 2C data. So now if you look at this data, there's a coloring going on here, right? What is the coloring? Internet is in dark maroon, and then slowly it fades out. You look at the coloring slowly fades out, meaning the efficacy of the data, right? The efficacy of the data. Let's say, for example, when you add target firms, it becomes more brighter, the color, meaning the efficacy is more. Top colleges, efficacy increases. But once you negate top colleges and firms in the last 2C model, it becomes very dim color, meaning your data will be gray area, right? It is a gray data set which you're going to get, right? Which may not have that much suitable data set, maybe 30% accuracy is what you're going to get, right? So this is one model which you're going to apply. And the second model is, what if there are people that from the top 5 services which you negated in second model, right? You negated top 5 services. Now you want to also look at those top 5 services and see, are there people from target firms? Let's say someone started his career in Infosys, now works in Amazon. Obviously you'll be interested, right? So that is your remaining 20% of data set. And then add target firms, that is 3A, right? And then 3B, top colleges, negate your target firms because you've seen in 3A, and then you come to 3C. So this is a model of breaking down your data sets into pieces. So if you start adopting to this model, you are using a 360-degree view of data set. You are not going to limit your searches to 1 or 2 models. This is a 360-degree view. You are going to touch base on all the possible search models, right? Now let's see how do you do that. This is how you build your efficacy model. This is your efficacy model, right? So what is it? 90% efficacy when you choose internet domain. We are not discussing Boolean here. I'm not talking about Boolean here. I'm talking about how do you break down your data sets, right? What are the models of breaking down data sets? I'm not discussing Boolean here. Okay. Boolean also helps you break down data sets. That's a different topic. We are not going to discuss this, at least for today. So yeah, so 90% efficacy when you use internet domain, 75% efficacy when you are applying, 75% efficacy when you're applying what? Competitors and minusing services. So this is nothing but these models is what I've put it into efficacy models, right? Whatever you're seeing here, top service, target firms, top colleges, right? So these models have broken it down, and to make it more simpler for you guys, I've bucketed it based on the searches. So generally I tell recruiters, when you write your search, you should be able to tell this search to what extent I'll get suitable data. Your search should speak for yourself. If your search can speak for yourself, you know what kind of a data set you'll be getting, right? So once you start bucketing in this manner, this is the efficacy model which is built based on the searches, right? Any questions here so far with what we have discussed? You can even unmute and ask. Any questions here so far? Any questions, guys, so far? Is it too complex? And do you find this interesting? You can put it on the chat window. Do you find this interesting of how do you break down these data models? Or it is very complex?
This is interesting, Ashfaq. Good to go.
Good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right. Okay. So, and this is like the first time I'm presenting something like this. So yeah. So basically, I started looking at search more in line to data somewhere around 2015 or 16, because that's when I was exposed to data science and I was fascinated with data science. And I started using Python, started working with NumPy, SciPy, and all that, right? And then after 3 months, I realized coding is not something which I would enjoy doing because bugs used to bug me a lot. Okay, so then I was like, coding is not something which I would do. But then the concepts of dealing data sets, right, was really fascinating for me, right? And that's when I started looking at data sets in a search context around that model, right? Okay, how all we can break it down. And that's when I started experimenting data sets and then came up with more structured way of addressing the search models on LinkedIn or any job boards and all that, right? So if you can bring up more models like this will just like bring down your sourcing time by at least like 30-40%, because you know what you're addressing. So this model alone, right, let's say if you can break it down like this, your 3-member team working or a 5-member team working, so you will allot each one of them each pie to work on, right? Hey, look, you work on this data pie, you work on that data pie. There's no overlapping data set. On, let's say, on a job board like Naukri, what will you do if you are looking at the same data? Your colleague will come and already process. What will you do on LinkedIn? Nothing. You can't do anything on LinkedIn, right? So you will send a request and then talk to the guy and then figure out, okay, my colleague also said the same guy, right? So that's what I keep telling recruiters. Why should your colleague see the same profile which you are viewing? Should not be same. Each one need to work on a different slice of data set, different pie of data set. That's when you will be more productive. Duplicacy demon is a bigger problem in our industry, right? Duplicacy demon is obviously a bigger problem. So that problem you can sort it out by first internally organizing yourself. If there are 3-5 recruiters working, internally organize, make sure none of you look at each of your data sets, each of you get unique data sets to work on. Then what happens? By default, you are more focused, right? And your productivity increases because none of you are looking on similar data sets, right? And the other important thing is, you know, the accuracy or the efficacy of your search models. You know, okay, I'm applying 2A, 2B. You know, okay, I'm going to get 70%, 80% accurate data, right? And you will come to the last models like the not competitor services colleges or services not these models only if required, or else you won't even come. So basically what's happening, you're cleaning your data set, right? You are ensuring in the first few searches you work only on the best of the data set, 90-75% efficacy. You come to that 40% below efficacy only if it is required. So you're cleaning the data set, you're minimizing the noise. This is called as data noise in a data science context, right? Irrelevant data set, junky data set is called as data noise. So you're minimizing your data noise, you're bringing them down and then concentrating or focusing on data which you really need, and then come to the gray data set only if it is required and you're going to come later, right? So that is where building models like this is really amazing. And if you can do this, trust me, you are going to minimize your sourcing time at least by 30%. Okay, so to do this, what do you need? You need to know how the data is structured, right? You need to know this, right? So what do you need to know? You need to know how's the information architecture, how is data presented, how you can retrieve the data. Let's say LinkedIn search model is there, right? What all filters are there? If I apply this filter, what will happen? Trust me, less than 2% recruiters really know how to go fetch data from LinkedIn. Less than 2% recruiters, because most of them just put keywords, okay, data aa gaya, okay, result mil gaya, khatam. So I tell people, if you're searching, you're not going to be an amazing sourcer. You need to play with the search. You need to just play. Just figure out, okay, if I do this, what happens? If I do that, what happens? Right? You need to figure, because each one is different. I'll give you one simple example, okay? Web services, the word web services, just example, okay? Web service is the word. If you use it on a job board like Naukri, that is enough. That will give you web services. It will also give you web services, the plural, web services, that also will give you. In LinkedIn, it doesn't give you. If you give web services, it is not going to give you web services, Are you aware of this? There are small nitty-gritties like this, which is in line to that particular information architecture and in line to their retrieval models. How will you know it? There's no rocket science. I'm not talking rocket science. This is all play. You need to play it. Just see how the search engine reacts. If I give this, what happens? If I change this, what happens? Is there a change in the information data? If I do this, this is 10,000. If I change this, whether it's 20,000, what is happening? That analysis is what is required, right? Once you start looking at your sourcing more from a data-centric manner and less from a JD-centric, right? You will become a more amazing sourcer, right? You will know how to look at information architecture, point one. And then candidate persona is something which is very, very important. If you need to be an amazing sourcer, move from a JD-centric recruiter to a candidate-centric recruiter, wherein you should know candidate persona, what they write, how they write, and what they don't write, right? Some people don't write certain things. Do you know for each role, what people don't write? For example, UI developer. Most of the UI developers don't talk about Ajax and jQuery, but most of the recruiters use that in the search lists, right? They use that in the searches. So do you know what not to use? Right? That's where your candidate persona understanding for each role is important. So once you have these informations, then it becomes easy, right? So people who have attended my sessions earlier, yes, not operator is the Superman of sourcing, but the point is it's just like an axe, right? You have the axe, but do you know how to use it? That's when you need to be more and more data centric, start playing with data set. That's when you will know how to really use the axe. So this is how you go about creating search models. Search 1, search 2, search 3, search 5. So you look at it, right, from left to right. Left is more darker, meaning the efficacy is good. And as you keep going, 7, the efficacy keeps going down. Meaning you come to 5, 6, 7 searches only if it is required, or else you don't come. Then what happens is your first search 1, search 2, search 3, it's more organized because you've cleaned and removed your 5, 6, 7 searches. You've kept it at the last. I'll see that data only if it is required, right? So that's why you're cleaning your data set, right? So you should know the entire data and how do you go about cleaning it, right? Yep. So the recruiting future revolves around the ability to contextually correlate data, right? So that is where it revolves. Tomorrow, even if sourcing gets automated, you can automate sourcing even today. I keep saying that, right? You can automate it because 70% of our sourcing efforts is more on what job boards and LinkedIn, isn't it? 30% is what we hunt for purple squirrels on X-Ray, GitHub, whatever, right? But I would say 70-80% of our hiring revolves around LinkedIn and Naukri. And I say that information is fairly structured. That information is structured on Naukri and LinkedIn. So if you can create buckets, data buckets like they used, and trust me, you can automate your sourcing because it becomes search libraries. Because I write data scrapers, right? I scrape data across LinkedIn and all that, right? So what I do, I create scraping models, how to go about scraping it, and each of the scraping model, I rate them. I say, okay, this scraping model, I know by default, I need not look at the profile. I know this will give me 90% data. This will give me 70% data. Oh, this is gray data. Because my search, from the search itself, I know what kind of a data I'm going to get. I need not go look at the data basically, right? So can you do that? Can you contextually correlate data, right? So that is what is the future of recruiting is basically, and that is where you need to be, and you will reach there only if you start playing with data sets, not by just searching, not by being JD centric, not by just being a recruiter who just plays with like 4 or 5 keywords. No, you're not. You just need to see how each search engine reacts, what happens, right? So yep, so this is where just a quick introduction of how you can create search models. So we end this session. So what we are looking at is coming up with a sourcing masterclass, basically 1 month kind of a crash course. This is for people who are not part of the mini diploma. We're doing a mini diploma course. So people who are part of it, you need not take part of this because that is covered there, because that's a mini diploma is a 3 months course, right? So I've been thinking of creating a 1 month course just on specifically on sourcing and talking a lot about data analysis and how do you go about doing it, right, for top 10 technology roles. 1 month kind of a course. So if at all you'll be interested, you can just drop a message to Ashwant and then he'll get back to you. So we are looking to start this somewhere around December, because we feel that's when the hiring also will go down a bit during December. So you'll have more time to upskill yourself basically, right? So yep, if you're interested, you can drop a message to Ashwin, and then he'll take it from there. So we're looking at somewhere in December to get started. It'll be a 1 month kind of a course around sourcing, wherein we cover all these gamut of things. Yeah. Cool. So yep. So here we end the session on data analysis. So question answers. It's open, and you can shoot out the questions. And let me know if this session was useful, because I just created it because I've been doing these search models and all that. So did you find this interesting? Did you find this useful? Put it on the chat window, and others, if you have questions, shoot out your questions.
Hello, Ashraf. This is Mastan.
Yeah.
I have a doubt regarding is searching candidates on the social networks. Do we need do a API type of coding thing to extract the candidates who are actively on the social media? Example, if I take like Twitter, very less people are active on the Twitter. Very limited people on the tech on the tech on the Twitter. Related to if I'm looking for any React developer or native React developer or any Angular developer, there are some forums, right, who keep on interacting with them related to the technology. Do we have any sourcing type of approach to tap to those type of candidates, like by using any data scrapping likewise?
Look, it's all about like this. Okay, you should know where your audience is spend time on, right?
Yeah.
Hardcore techies, they're not active on Twitter. Twitter is a place where there are people, but very less techies, right? So it's the people, techies are majorly on Stack Overflow, GitHub, and there are a lot many other new platforms. That's where people are, right? So as recruiters, there are two things. One is you should know where your techies revolve around, and then you can use basic sourcing approaches, like you can use good amount of X-ray approaches to search data sets, right? You don't really need scraping, because public information is there, so you can just go get the public information, right? That's not really required. If you can be a good sourcer, you can go get that information. So beyond that is not really required. But if you want to be, there are some sources who are getting into the coding piece of things, and they're trying to get a hang of things. So it's the next league. If you want to be in the next league, yes, there's a good need for such kind of sources, right? Who can write APIs, who can write scrapers and all that. That's a different league, okay? So that if you feel you should be there, yeah, there's nothing wrong in it. So you can practice around that, right? But in general, not required.
Okay.
Anything else, guys?
Ashfaq, Varun here.
Yeah.
So this model, efficacy model, which you just explained, is it specific to LinkedIn Recruiter or LinkedIn, or can it be related to other job portals?
It can be replicated to anything, right? It's just a simple model which I've come up with. So this model can be replicated anywhere, but maybe it might need some tweaks based on where you're working. For Naukri, it might need some tweaks here and there, right? So it might need some tweaks, but overall, this holds good. Fair enough. Anything else, guys? No, not really, Madhab. Even if you're working on niche skills, it is helpful, right? But what kind of niche skills you're working on? If you're working on different people have different purview about niche skills, right? So for me, niche skills is based on data sets. Let's say if your data set is just thousand profiles is what you're going to get, right? There you need a different approach of bucketing data sets, right? What is a different approach? Let's say you have given 5 mandatory parameters, and then you've got 1,000 data sets, right? You've given 5 mandatory parameters, you've got 1,000 data sets. Now you need to build models like, what if someone has written 4? Will he be still suitable for you? What if someone has written 3? What if someone has written 2? Right? So these kind of bucketing, which is generally done using not operator. And on LinkedIn, this goes really well, because LinkedIn is a place where people write the least of the information, right? 70% of the people have less than 6 to 7 sentences on their profile. then you need to consider even people who have written just like out of 5 mandatory, even 1, 2, right? So you need to consider that, right? So that kind of a models you can create obviously on LinkedIn even for a niche role which has 1,000 when you give all your 5 mandatory skills, right? And then you create buckets. Only 4, how many have written? Only 3, how many have written, right? That kind of a models you can create. How do I say internet? So how do I say internet? It's like this. The data is very minimal, and most of the product guys use internet, right? Most of the product guys. So you can just filter internet. The example or the case study which I picked up is a product case study, right? So if you go look at the LinkedIn information and you see the kind of a data, right? It is majorly product guys put internet on their profiles. That's why I said even there's a little bit of ambiguity or there's some bit of irrelevant data set. There is there, right? I did not say 100% bang on data. I said 80%, 85% you are suitable. Still there is 15-20% irrelevant data set. Meaning the efficacy is more there because majorly people from the product side use internet. So based on that information is what I say. Anything else, guys? All good? No questions? We wrap it? Cool. Okay, so it was amazing having you. Hope the session was useful. There's some questions. Wait. Do you suggest to slice by skills? Do you suggest slice by skills? Again, what is the amount of data set? So obviously, look, today I did not talk about Boolean because we've spoken about Boolean in the past, right? So yes, based on a data set, you can slice it based on skill sets, based on domains, right? Based on the amount of information you have. If you have too much of information, obviously you need to break it down, right? You need to break it down into different slices. Then you use your Boolean models to break it down, right? The concept is very simple. Don't have too much of information in front of your screen, right? If you have too much of information, you cannot consume it. So create buckets of it, then it becomes easy. Right. So yeah. Any possibilities of a demo for this? Okay, so if you guys are here, if you want to hang around, I can give a demo. Don't mind. I'll give a demo now. I show a demo based on what was spoken. I did not pick the demo because I know it would go beyond 1 hour or whatever, right? So I didn't pick the demo. But if some of you want to stay back, look at the demo, I don't mind. Is the screen visible, guys? Put it on the chat. Can you see the screen? Screen is visible?
Yes, Ashfaq.
Yes? Okay, cool. Let's say I'm going to use Java and Java.
Ashfaq, can I make it relevant to my search, what I'm looking right now?
No, I want to just keep it generic. I'm keeping it generic. I don't want to pick, but then there'll be too many examples coming in, so I don't want to do that.
Okay. Okay.
Java, right? And let's say I'm going to use Java and REST and SQL. So what you could do is you go here, right? And then you see the first, it's like 490,000 people, but then you drill it down. You need to keep drilling down the information. That's when you know how much you've covered, how much you're missing, right? Most of the people don't know how much you're missing. So yeah, so you have 80,000 people who talk about Java, REST, and SQL in India, right? So you cannot consume 80,000. So slice it down further. Go with Bangalore, right? So you need to know your slices really well, data slices. So yeah, you have 25,000 now. Okay. So once you have 25,000, then what do? You slice it down further, right? So what you do is you go with all filters. You can go with, let's say, internet, right? Just go. I'll show you internet, which has all these information. Can you see from 25,000 we are here at 876? That's why I told you less than 3%, right? Less than 5%. You see all the product guys, Redbuzz. You see the Whatfix, Myntra, Akamai, Paytm. You see this? All product guys bang on right on your screen. So that is why I told you 80-85% efficacy if it is an internet domain, right? That's the reason. So that doubt is clear. Next, we move to the next model.
Yeah. I mainly hire only for product basis, Ashraf. Mainly I hire for all the startups, product basis, all fintech companies and insurtech companies, and they pick up the candidates only from B2C companies. Don't give preference any services company.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yep. So yeah. So looking at the data models, so that is one. So next is like in IT services. You see 12,000. 25 was the data and 12,000. That's what I told you. 50%. 50% is what your IT services is. So just to show you some example, let's say, just to show you some example. Let me give Flipkart. Just to show you. So there are 82 people who currently work with Flipkart or maybe worked earlier, right? So yep, there's this information, right? So that's what I told. Add competitors to it, right? You can add competitors, and then that is one model you can go creating, and then maybe you can use colleges. I'm just giving one example. Okay, I'm not giving too many examples. This is just to show you a demo of how different data sets looks, nothing else. IIT, there are 219 people. IIT, you can change IIT to NIT and other colleges, look at different data, right? 120, right? So yep, so that's how you go about creating data buckets basically, right? And then you can obviously come up with probabilistic search models. So for people who have been in the sourcing series and the coaching series, they know how to create probabilistic models, right? One search is how do you create it into 5, 7, 8, 10, right? So you implement those models. So this is outside the probabilistic. What we have spoken is in line to LinkedIn. How do you create models, right? Based on the data information, based on a holistic view of LinkedIn data, right? You have 1 million data, 50,000 data. How do you break that down into pieces? And then on top of it, apply probabilistic models. Now, I don't think I'll have time to take you through probabilistic models, right? So probably you can join the weekend sourcing series to look at how do you build probabilistic models basically, right? So yep, did this help, guys? Did this help you get a purview about what I spoke about data models, data analysis? Did this help? Guys, did this help?
Yes, Ashfaq. I think you've covered this already in the advanced sourcing workshop.
Well, I did not talk in line to how do you break it down into the way I spoke, right?
Slicing and dicing, I guess you have covered.
Slicing and dicing, yeah, that is with skills.
Okay.
It is more in line to skills, right? How do you build models with skills is what we spoke about.
Right. And this is about domain, am I right?
This is not just domain. This is more in line to if you have like 10 lakh ka data, you have 5 lakhs data. How do you break that data down and create buckets? This is more general. This has nothing. That's why I didn't pick any example per se or any skills per se, right? So I kept it more general and then went on breaking down the information. Right. So yep. So hope the demo helped, right? So yep. Anything else, guys, before we wrap it? All good. We wrap this. cool then. So it was amazing having you this evening for the session. Hope you had some takeaways. Hope the things were beneficial, right? So we'll catch up sometime later in some other series, right? Shout out. Good evening. Thank you. Right. Have an amazing evening. See ya.
Thanks, Ashfaq. Bye-bye. Thank you.